To keep myself limber and creative and out of my comfort zone, I've challenged my Instagram audience to give me a word a day, something unique and unexpected to get my brain moving and my juices flowing. I've learned a great deal from the experience. I continue to learn a great deal about planning and process and composition. On August 15th, 2018, the word of the day was harbinger, meaning a person or thing that announces or signals the approach of another, a forerunner of something. It's a pretty badass word, one with almost biblical connotations, and it made me think of locusts. Back in the days of yore, when life was short and civilization tenuous, the arrival of these creatures was not an awe-inspiring planet Earth-style cinematic affair, but an act of damnation, a curse that spelled ruin and death for the poor farmers below. It began the same way every time, with just a handful of arrivals, the dreaded harbingers, and then the rest would come. We do not refer to a group of locusts as a pack or a herd, but a plague, for they come in such numbers as to blacken out the sun, and when they fell like rain upon the fields, they did not depart until every inch of edible material was gone. Enter the Venement, or a relative of the Venement. My intention here was to create something horrible and gothic in nature, a harbinger of nameless evil, just touched down on some unsuspecting village. Now, instead of using a locust for reference, I used a camel cricket. Why? Because they're creepy and hunchback, and I still have uneasy memories of them hopping around in my mother's basement, where they live to this day. I wanted the design to transcend the natural world, so I molded its face to look human and gave it lank, blowing hair. Now, our Venement might be terrifying, but it won't be supernatural, at least not explicitly. We'll employ a few human characteristics, just enough to make the audience uncomfortable. The cricket reference is just a jump-off point, pun intended. But as with the Night Stepper and the Stormbjorn, I find it's quite helpful to root a creature design in a specific being's morphology, meaning its form or its structure. Once that's in place, we'll mix in others. Our audience might not even recognize what these other references are. In fact, in my experience, they usually don't, but it will serve to mix in flavor and zing. The words we picked for the Venement were vicious and baleful. Baleful means to threaten harm or be menacing. Vicious means deliberately cruel or violent. When I think of the words vicious and baleful, I think of someone or something that doesn't want to be touched, someone prickly, sharp-tongued, liable to make barbed comments. Prickly, sharp, barbed. These words have shapes to them, don't they? They aren't blocky shapes, nor are they weighty, nor are they pillowy and soft. They are penetrating and knife-like. Seems like a great place to start. Camel crickets already have a particularly angular physique, barring the curving totality of their bodies. Their legs, especially their back legs, are all long and skinny, with joints that hinge at dramatic angles. If we look even closer, we begin to see that those legs are riddled with needles, like those found on a cactus. Now, I suspect that those have a lot less to do with defense and more to do with gaining traction in the undergrowth. We can use these spines to our advantage, and we most certainly will. But let's back up a step and remain focused on the larger forms at play, since these large forms are the ones that will have the greatest visual impact on our audience. The Venement will have a rounded shape to its body, not rounded like a balloon, and not fat like a panda, but hunched over, curled inward like a larva, or something that does not want to be touched, something that if you did touch it, might jump suddenly and with violence. We'll emphasize that kinetic potential with back-slung legs. As humans, we're trained to see those legs and think jumpy. We'll even add more limbs to bring it to a total of 6, and though I'm tempted to add more, I won't. The Venement will be creepy enough. Adding a bunch of legs on top of that just feels like a cheat. I might add a couple more later on, mandibles or pedipalps, which are sort of like hands for shoveling food into the mouth. Now, your average insect is composed of 3 major body segments, which are, say it with me now, the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. I've noticed over the years that many artists who draw insects without reference end up collapsing these parts down into 2, or even 1, so that they'll draw the legs as extensions of the abdomen. This is not how insects work. If the head is the control center of the body, then the thorax is the engine, the location of the motor. What do I mean by that? Well, insects are invertebrates. Their bones are on the outside, which means that their muscles are on the inside. The thorax, which is the rooting place of the head, the legs, and the abdomen, is therefore full of muscle. I find this idea most easy to visualize with dragonflies. To me, the bulging thorax of a dragonfly looks piped, like the body of a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, loaded with an engine that powers not only their legs, but their 4 powerful wings. Crickets don't really fly, so their hopping, earthbound bodies are more tightly packed than that of a dragonfly or a wasp. This results in a more unified shape, which will allow us to describe the body as a whole using fewer, simpler strokes. In this case, those strokes curl over, giving us that hunched over shape. Except that hunched over shape can look rather cute, like they're shy, bending away from us or pressing their little face to the ground. Cute, however, is not what we're going for. We'll tilt that head up and forward, and that should change the feel of it quite a bit. Something that faces you head on is able to make direct eye contact. It can speak to you, or it can bite. Picture insects not as living, scuttling creatures, but as tiny robots, built for a specific environment. I don't know whether insects have emotions like humans do. In fact, I suspect that in some ways they do. But I do know that their nervous systems are quite simple, designed to react to stimuli in very immediate and particular ways. Their bodies are segmented, with limbs like hydraulic pumps or pulleys. Those limbs are designed for very particular jobs. Some are strong, like the back legs of a cricket, which are capable of propelling the creature up to 3 feet in distance, dozens of times the length of their own body. Other limbs are delicate and weak, designed only for fine motor control. Insects can freak us out in part because they appear to move with unnatural speed. If we can divorce our attentions from those qualities which frighten us most, then we can begin to view these creatures with greater objectivity, understanding, and appreciation. If we can see these creatures for what they really are, really see them, then our own creations won't look cartoonish and rubbery like Halloween masks. They'll look real. And, on the other hand, if you can successfully identify what precisely it is that makes something disturbing and why, then you can isolate that nightmare factor, put it in a box, experiment on it, and then use it on your audience. I did this with the blood bug. The concept art, done by my phenomenal friend Ray Lederer, was fantastic. But what I wanted to emphasize in the modeling was that feeling of legginess. So, like the face huggers from Alien, I emphasized the legs of the blood bug to look like jointed finger bones. I wanted the player to see them and immediately imagine what it would feel like to be seized. Alright, upon finishing the first round of silhouettes, I asked my Twitter audience to weigh in on their favorites. These entries were numerous and chaotic, so I listened to their feedback and tried to think very carefully about the responses I was getting. From there, I narrowed down the results to a smaller batch, which I refined and showed again. The responses to that helped me to arrive here, at the final silhouette. This is far from perfect, and I'm sure we'll redraw it later, but it's a decent start. Let's fill in the silhouette with a quick detail pass, just to test things out and do some initial problem solving. The creature here has a cricket-like shell, a little too formulaic perhaps, but that's alright. I like the idea of hands on the ends of its legs. It's a pretty creepy aesthetic, and if we can do this in an elegant, expressive way, because remember, hands are expressive, then perhaps they can be included in our list of iconic elements. The iconic elements we've arrived at here include a wig of hair, the long, multi-jointed back legs, a pale flesh tone aesthetic, and, my personal favorite, hands. Adding humanoid digits to an insect will certainly crank up the shudder factor. We don't yet know the Venement. A door has opened in the dark, and we've begun to see the shape of it, but as nasty as it may look, we don't yet know its intentions. So let's tilt its face to the light and get a look. We're experimenting with just how human the face can be while simultaneously maintaining its evolutionary origins as an oversized invertebrate. We'll experiment with ways to make the face disassemble, because there's nothing quite so horrifying as seeing the human face come apart. This transformation will be made possible by the mandibles, which are the mouthparts of an insect. I'm designing a smoother, more feminine face with bloody red eyes. My original drawing had hair on its head, and I admit the idea does appeal to me, but selling this idea, without selling the Venement as a magical being, could be a tricky affair. Giving it a humanoid face is one thing, but adding human hair is a much bigger ask. And yet, And yet doesn't it intrigue you? Don't you want to see what that would look like? Okay, cool. Yes, me too. We can mitigate the human element a bit by giving the Venement a more inhuman hairline. That's what they did with the predator, after all. And if we treat this hair in a way compatible with how real insects grow their hair, insects like tarantulas, caterpillars, moths, and bees, then we can maybe sell it without going overboard. We could make it look like a mane, except that might lend the Venement gravitas and nobility, and that's not really what we're going for at all. We'll be going for something longer and stringier, like that girl from The Ring. Now, black hair on something so pale, however, might be a bridge too far. White hair, with a yellowish tint perhaps, might fit better, and be more realistic, and take us a half step back from the uncanny valley. The colors of the sun spider are also pretty great. Crimson and brown mixed in with milky, translucent whites. What a delicious palette. Speaking of palettes, here's the one I'll be using. As before, I've sampled from a number of hopefuls, including the sun spider, some beetle larvae, and a handful of albino cockroaches that I found lurking in the dark corners of the internet. I'm making sure to add enough variation to ensure richness for myself. Too few colors, after all, and we won't have enough to work with. Remember, as before, to start off your painting with a more neutral set of colors. We don't want to jump in with too much contrast right away. The contrast we do have will allocate to the head and forearms. I'm painting those arms red and giving them a bit of shine to tell the audience two things. First, these arms and hands are dangerous. And second, these arms are hard-shelled, one of the hardest areas on the entire creature. Unlike the Stormbjorn, they do not give gentle touches. Around this time in the Venement's development, my wife informed me that she wasn't going to come into my office anymore because the Venement was too scary. Now, my wife loves me because of, not despite of, my passion for monsters, and she's a fan of fantasy and horror. But she told me that the Venement is too overwhelmingly hideous, that I'd gone overboard, danced right past what looked natural and into the realm of nightmare. At first, I brushed this off. The point is to elicit an emotional reaction, I said. But then my cousin came to town and told me that he also thought so. I had gotten a lot of a reaction from my social media following, but it was almost all revulsion and horror, and I think I just mistook that for enthusiasm. But I've realized now that they're right. This is no longer an animal, this is a nightmare. Jonah, you've gone too far. So, let's rewind and try something new. When I polled my audience with these portraits, I got some interesting feedback. While the humanoid face received the most shudders, it was this one that people told me looked the most bestial. Considering I've gone too far down into the uncanny valley, I could probably use some bestial, and the personality traits that define the Venement, vicious and baleful, match up pretty well. In sketching out this new head, we'll be focused on the inhuman aspects of our creation. Our reference of choice will be the praying mantis. I like the triangular aspect of its head and the predatory connotations. Our secondary reference, of course, will be the hammerhead shark, which is very kaiju-esque. Given that we've already colored the rest of the Venement, it'll take some work to rebuild that color scheme and make it visually compatible. Its wide-set eyes, which were red before, will differentiate themselves from the general color scheme now by teetering past yellow into the green end of the spectrum. This is a good look, but I'm not finding the face to be so interesting overall. It's just not popping out at me. Its personality doesn't really have space to shine. No problem though. All we have to do is experiment. Now, because the simplicity of its head shape is paramount, the base majority of our experimentation here will be color-based. Red is the power color of this creature, so maybe we can use that color in its full saturated glory to emphasize one of its more vicious aspects, its mouth. There, that looks cool. That red color, coupled with a bit of shine, makes the mouth feel engorged like swollen gums. Beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for watching this portion of the Venement's development. I had a really fun time making this creepy, crawly, disgusting little critter based on the crickets in my mother's basement. If you'd like to watch the full version of this course, including the development of this, the Venement, or two other creatures, the Nightstepper and the Stormbjorn, check out my course on my website, jonahloeb.com or Gumroad, entitled Chimaera, a Creature Design Masterclass. I think you'll really enjoy it. But no matter what you do, subscribe to my channel, ring the bell. I have a whole suite of things planned for this year, I'm really excited to jump in here, and I really want you to be part of what we're building here. So subscribe, ring the bell, join me, and comment. Please let me know what you'd like to see. Anything. The world is our oyster. We can go in some of these different directions, and I want to hear from you. Thanks so much.